Hello everyone, so this was posted on the web dev subreddit a few days ago and I thought it looked interesting and thought we should cover it. So I'm glad AI didn't exist when I learned to code. Let me know when you learned to code below and what your thoughts are on this as always. We're going to be looking at the comments and first reading the small article that they've written. And by the way guys, if you like this sort of tech related content, don't forget to like and subscribe. So let's get started. So I want to preface this by saying I'm no programming expert. I'm only a high schooler who started learning how to code a few years back, around 2019. So that's now 6 years. And I think 3 years before ChatGPT came out. I'm not sure on the timings. I think it was about 2022. Regardless, I thought I'd share my thoughts on this topic because code is dead. It's being thrown around all the time. To be honest, code is dead has been thrown around since before LLMs. I feel like it's been a thing for at least, for years. And it's good clickbait, I suppose. Maybe I'll make a video saying code is dead. So moreover, I loosely use the word AI in this write-up. I'm referring to LLMs. Glad for specifying. Specifically LLMs tuned for developer tooling. I feel like LLMs and AI have become truly synonymous. You have like generative AI, and then which I think people refer to like images and videos and stuff, and then LLMs, which is what they're talking about most of the time. So when I wrote my first line of Python code, I only had access to Python documentation, YouTube tutorials, and random help forums on the internet. Yeah, those were the good old days. And do you know what? That's actually surprising. I did a Hello World Python video probably years ago. I've had a lot of breaks on YouTube, and it still gets like 60 views a day. It's like crazy. Or like maybe like 30, 40. I can't believe people are still watching that terrible video I did. So if I didn't understand a line of code, I would stare at it until it made sense. Or else I could ask for help on Discord servers and Stack Overflow, i.e. just talking with people. Although I guess I feel like this isn't that much different to talking to an LLM now. I had the habit of not copying code from YouTube tutorials. So this made it easier to understand what each line of code did. Saying I had the habit of not copying code from YouTube tutorials. I think I'm hoping what they mean is that they didn't just copy the whole thing and then run it, but rather sort of trying to understand each line, I suppose. After a few months, I knew inbuilt functions, signatures like the back of my hand. To be honest, I'm a senior dev and I don't memorize functions, to be honest, like that. Senior dev, that doesn't really mean anything, I know. When I wanted to solve a problem, I could create a mental map of the approach immediately before implementing it in code. I think this is the key thing. It's just, like, all code is trash, right? And the only thing that really matters is, does your implementation make sense? The outcome of learning without AI, I understood principles. Sure. Yeah, and I guess that's the thing. It's like, anyone who learned coding in a sort of more traditional way, they know that almost every language is sort of has similar principles. Of course they vary, otherwise there wouldn't be any point in them existing, but you could sort of abstract across languages and learn them quite easily once you learned their syntax and whatnot. But it was annoying. I spent hours fixing a small syntax error or type error because I couldn't just ask Cursor Composer to fix this error, please. True. I hated this. I hated spending so long fixing these trivial issues so that I could instead actually write code that mattered. I think this is quite an interesting point. I mean, we've all experienced this. Everyone here has probably wasted hours, maybe even days on some weird bug that they had to really go out of their way to learn some things to understand. I think that ultimately that's a good thing, but But I think, sorry, that last point they said was quite interesting because I feel like there's two mindsets in engineering. I feel like you have the hardcore engineers who are all about, they care about the technical implementation and the code being as good as possible. And then I feel like you have the people who care about just getting something done and having something that works. And generally, I guess we're all in both boxes a bit, but I think I'm more in the get things done box rather than the caring about the most technical optimization. Unless you hit limitations. I think that's why it's good to have sort of like criteria, because then at least once you have criteria, you have more context on how the problem needs to be solved. So I always wish there could be a way to fix my code with a single shortcut. So fast forward to 2025, where we're at now, 6 years later, we do have that. And in retrospect, I'm glad I didn't have this feature 6 years ago. I think I've actually said this in previous videos myself, that I'm glad that I learned to code before AI. I think I would have been a bit intimidated, because it would feel like anyone can do it. That's how I would have felt, I feel like. Whereas I know when I learned to code, like, a lot of people struggled with it. I'd say most of my learning experiences came from experimenting and fixing these trivial errors. Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing you get is, like, you get a feel. You get a feel for the errors and how to solve them. And you can just do it faster, you know, how to debug it properly. If you just like copy and paste an error messages into ChatGPT and you never actually read it and it gives you a solution, you're never actually going to learn what the mistake is. So even now, I still try to really understand it. I do use LLMs, but I still try to understand the problems I'm solving and make sure it's actually a good solution. The lack of experimentation when writing code with AI just makes for an awful learning process. By the way, I think this goes two ways. I think ultimately this comes down to you, the individual, and how you use it. AI is a tool, LLMs are a tool. You can use those tools to actually become even better, or you can use those tools to become lazy. And it's on you. The problem is most people are sort of, I think, somewhat naturally lazy. And I don't really mean like lazy, just like I think people like to use the least amount of energy possible for a thing. But yeah, it's down to you if you use an LLM to enhance your experience or to just like not have to think. Anyway, I went on a bit of a tangent there. So, the lack of experimentation when writing code with AI just makes for an awful learning process. I think what they're saying is they're just like, rather than having to like try and implement various different solutions, you just go straight to a fix. If AI dev tooling had existed in the hands of a 13-year-old me, I would have used it to fix every single bug, so I'm glad that didn't exist. Probably true. I have to admit, I still use Cursor every day to write code. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Around boring implementation details, especially when building UI. Yeah, they're good for building like a initial sort of page, but I think I'm okay with paying the price right now. When I'm building something from scratch with C or Rust, I still go to NeoVim, to RawDog. I like the word RawDog for programming. I guess that's sort of true experience of no AI tools. You can check out some of the projects. Yeah, why not? Chess engine, Linux containers. Cool, some interesting stuff there. So yeah, give me your thoughts on that below. We're gonna now read some comments. X2, me too. What does X2 mean? Am I not down with the kids? I feel like I learned, times two, as they say. Yeah, I think they're saying like times two, as in like plus also me. I feel like I learned more of the principles and problem solving skill while staying for hours into a screen, looking up for silly errors. Now having an AI solve me this. Yeah, definitely. How do I collapse? I want to read this comment. It's quite long. We might not read all of it. I feel this is an idea every generation goes through, and now it's our turn. When a new technology makes things easier, those who had to grind manually often think it will hinder people's understanding or skill development, but it doesn't. You end up becoming even better and doing more because the friction of handling small tasks is reduced. Possibly. I can see both sides to this. Again, I think this goes back to what I said on the article, which is it comes down to the individual, you know. But yeah, it's sort of like in sport, you know. I'm going to use football, soccer as an example. Like you had like the greats like Pele and Maradona, but while they were the best at their time, the standards have continually risen. So now like footballers as a whole are all much, much better. I don't know. I feel like maybe that was a bad example, but it kind of made sense in my head at the time when I said it. Oh yeah, because they were talking about them getting better and better, and that's what I was talking about. So the standard keeps increasing, but maybe this maybe closes the gap between the worst and best developer. Yeah, so I think I finally got there. Congratulations. Older generations thought that writing assembly was necessary to truly understand programming. That's like von Neumann. Von Neumann, I'm convinced, is probably, so John von Neumann, I've said it before, I think he's the smartest person that's ever lived. Of course, it doesn't really matter, but, you know, he's up there. He said, I don't see why we would ever develop anything other than assembly. But I think he's so wrong about that. Because I've never touched assembly. Actually, I guess I technically have. I did an engineering degree, electrical engineering. But higher level languages like C++, Java, and Python allow developers to focus on solving the higher level problems, yeah, and sort of representing them in more natural ways that human brains understand a bit better, rather than dealing with low level memory management. They thought graphical interfaces would weaken a programmer's understanding, but IDEs and visual debuggers made development faster and more efficient. I'm glad the internet didn't exist when I learned to code, so I could grind. Sounds ridiculous, but I bet someone said it. Having the internet to look up solutions didn't stop us. AI won't hinder... I think there's some interesting thoughts in there. AI won't hinder principles or problem-solving skills because they won't be a need for today's kinds of manual expertise anymore. Instead, those skills will be covered and new challenges will emerge that require a different skill set. That bit's definitely true. I think ultimately what they're saying is true, but I think I can still see sort of both sides to it. I mean, it's just a preference. But again, it might say more about the individual than the technology itself. Because I think when I sort of thought about it, yeah, it's more so that I feel like if I started programming now, I feel quite intimidated because of like how much AI is developed in the space. And even though I'm a developer now and I'm happy with my job and confident I'll continue to have work, I think if I was young now, I'd feel a bit, I don't know, like, is it worth it to learn the skill when an LLM can just write code? Which would probably be the wrong point of view, but yeah. So let's collapse this. I want to collapse. Oh no, we haven't read that. AI is fun and all, but when there's some nasty bug that LLM can't help me with and the internet is already dead, then it gets really bad. I think most problems have already been solved. You know, you can find an obscure bug and someone will have solved it like 5 years ago. So I don't think the internet is dead, per se. I didn't mean to click on their profile. Same. I'd be tempted to over-rely on it before I understood the feeling of getting over that learning curve and understanding. At risk of repeating myself too many times, again, it comes down to the individual. If you want to learn and understand it, LLMs are amazing because you can learn faster. I think there's just no doubt about that. Like, even now, I quite often just use it because I can learn faster from that, and I can ask it to give me an analogy or a specific example or an edge case, and it's able to do that, or like a little... So, yeah, if you're not... It's definitely a great thing if you just have a like positive mindset and you're not worried about it and you're just using it as a tool. I think you're all good. It's been relegated to boilerplate, maker, and quick tutorial demo of unfamiliar technologies rather than my replacement. This is what I do as well. I don't like to like memorize boring stuff. So like sometimes when I'm implementing like I don't know, let's say a specific JavaScript function, and we know there's a bunch of different ways you can do the same stuff. I'll have like, oh, can you generate a few examples of each one? And then I'll kind of go from there and say, oh, I think this is the best way to implement it and grab that code. It just allows you to like rapidly get examples. And I'm one of those, I definitely learn by examples. I've always thought, that's how I've always liked learning. Like, show me an example and then I'll work it out. That's how I like to learn. It's kind of like there was an apocalyptic event overnight and our supply chains failed, and we're all forced to survive on our own terms. None of us would ever even have the slightest idea how to survive without modern conveniences. Contrasted to our it's like that meme, I wish I could go back in time and share my knowledge. I wish I could go back in time and share my knowledge. I just spelled it wrong. I don't know if this will come up. I'm hoping it will. I bet you. Oh yeah, it is this one. It's the first one that comes up. So how do you make electricity? I don't know. It's pretty much that. None of us know anything. It's actually a fun thought experiment. If you went like back a couple hundred years, how much knowledge do you actually have in your head? Rather than just an idea, but like concrete knowledge. Not just like, oh, I know this, I know that relativity exists. Like, what concrete knowledge do you actually have that you could go back in time and share coherently? And you realize that your knowledge is really fragile. Code automation is like this too. It makes building digital applications incredibly simple and fast, but what happens if the system fails? What does it do if we can no longer understand or test the code we're given? I mean, you can test it with getting an LLM to produce the tests. Easy. What does it say about you as a developer when going up against other developers? I try to not use AI, do this for me tool, but more as a show me how to do this tool. Yeah, that's kind of what I said. I agree with that. I try my best to make sure I understand the code. Of course, we all have lazy moments. Oh, it works. Actually, do I do that? No, I don't think so. I think I always try and understand what's going on. Yeah. But that's just my personality. Development may cease to be a viable job if you end up with super intelligent AI, but at least I won't retain some skill. AI can't be accountable for software though, so you always need those people accountable. The brain is like a muscle, and if it's not used, it will entropy. This is also true. You've probably like felt this yourself. I felt it myself. When you're not focused, if you're like watching videos all day or whatever, it's like I've always thought I know I don't quite mean it like this. Probably the wrong way of wording it, but I've always thought like intelligence is a state of mind. I can have days where I'm more intelligent than others. It's like dynamic. It's not like a set in stone thing. Maybe your intelligence cap is like set in stone, but yeah, your brain is a muscle. It really is. If you stop using that brain, it just gets worse. Weirdly, I agree. So I remember a recent issue with the Twilio and Fast API. I had to debug it properly, change one thing, test, write down the result, and revert back and change another thing, test, and so on. Finally found the issue being unrelated to Twilio and Fast API and some HTTP header issue. No way an LLM could process 3 different systems, one of them not related to the code. I don't know, it could... I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong. But I feel like it could give you ideas. You could be like, can you give me 10 ideas about what this problem could potentially be? And I wouldn't be surprised if it might say that. Perhaps it is an issue related to a HTTP header. It is horrendous when trying to fix actual issues when prod is failing. I think this is often to do with the fact that like production environments are more like niche, created by a bunch of engineers. But yeah, I'm not saying... I guess they're right. I've also had issues in the past with like Docker. This was a few years ago. I imagine ChatGPT's back much better now. Well, it is much better now, but it would just get stuck in this loop. Everyone's been stuck in this loop where it keeps recommending you the same thing, even though you've like, I've already told you that this didn't solve it. So yeah. The trick is, does the person using AI actually learn what it's telling them? Yes. We hired someone from Upwork to do PHP programming. Upwork records a screenshot every 10 minutes. That's crazy. I didn't know that. Just about every simple task can be seen on the history on ChatGPT. When they are on that, this time with the screenshot. That one screenshot, ChatGPT complaining one error from MySQL saying field doesn't exist in table means. And this is like the laziness. This is probably not understanding that. I've been guilty of this myself. In fact, if I know, like, if something, yeah. But yeah, that is quite bad. I'd be quite embarrassed. Maybe if that was the case, I'd probably have like a separate laptop. Depends if it catches the whole screen or just like a specific monitor. Otherwise, you just have it on another monitor. AI existed when I started learning, but I never got around to using it. I'm just glad that my method revolves around actual problem solving, even if it means coding through rough, sometimes asking others a lot. I mean, I'm learning to program now in the midst of AI existing. I simply avoid even the idea of using it. I don't think you need to do that. I know it's not going to help me learn. Again, I don't think this is true. It can absolutely help you learn. You just have to ask it the questions that help you learn and understand. You have to know yourself how you learn. For me, I like all the context. I like understanding really. I try to understand on a deep level why it's done a certain way. It's the same thing I've had, but when doing research, I was judging, for example, Redux, MobX, I would play with these. Boring. Yes, AI can make people feel less inclined to put in effort. Yeah, this comes down. This is like a kind of why I said it. This is like a human trait almost. I think there will be times when you can't be bothered, but you still need to do the work, and and sometimes you will end up just not putting the effort. It all depends on how you use it. There you go. I disagree. I've been into web dev for decades and currently learning a new stack. Copilot has been super helpful as I can just select some code, right click. I think what I love about sort of this age of AI and LLMs is that before I wanted to get really good in like one stack, right? I decided because I kind of in my first sort of web dev job, or second really, but like I did some embedded stuff and then I went back to web dev and that was all Django. So I said to myself, look, I'm going to get really good at Django, and I'm going to choose a front end framework. I decided at the time that was going to be Vue.js. I was like, I'm going to get really good at that. I'm going to learn Django, Axios, and Vue.js, and then just use the ORM with a Postgres, and maybe Docker as well. And I got really good at that stuff. Whereas now I feel like I'm not intimidated by any technology. Obviously, part of that comes as being someone who's sort of got experience, but it's also like because I know with an LLM I'll be able to just learn anything quickly. If you ask me to now go build you an application in Golang or C, like any language, I know I'd be able to do it. Whereas before, it would have been a pain. So I think they're great for that. I think it really allows for more. It kind of allows you to go and use the right tool rather than the tool that you're most comfortable with. Honestly, I agree with this one too. AI has been really helpful in day to day, but I can't having to learn programming with this much power back then. I must just take the easy ways. Okay. Going more your way and ignoring most of them. Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I would like to experiment with some more, but because of like convenience, I've used Perplexity and I use ChatGPT, but I've not even signed up for some of the other ones, so I need to give them a go. I feel this way too, but I also feel this way about things like Docker, Laravel, Symfony, React. I'm sure other people felt this way about jQuery. They are all symptoms of much larger problems. They're just how we perceive and solve logic puzzles, and ultimately how we value labor and time. Are you being encouraged to enjoy solving the puzzle? Or are you begrudgingly getting through the task at hand because you have more tasks at hand? Yes. This is again the mindset I was talking about. Do you actually, and this is like the mindset of getting the job done versus being the engineer and wanting to solve the puzzle optimally. The goal impressed upon us is efficiency in time above all else. True, we have generally people nowadays work in agile sprints and they're just trying to get as much work done as possible as quickly as possible. If you want to learn, do it on your own time. True. It is like that. I mean, my company's great at offering you some time to learn, but it is like that. We probably spend more time today trying to conform to framework works than we do working with actual code. Because everything that we write is already built on thousands of shortcuts. That's how LLM responses are framed. They're based on our own human concepts and discussion on the web. Absolutely true. I mean, everything you pull from an LLM is it's not original knowledge, you know. It's just a bunch of data that's then the LLM has tried to understand and regurgitate back to you. Don't get me wrong, shortcuts aren't bad things. I'm not going to abandon frameworks because they do improve my experience writing code, absolutely. But I'm also coming from a perspective of years of self-taught, agonizing code writing, troubleshooting. I already know some of how the secret sauce was made before buying it off the shelf. LLMs have made reading documentation and code bases much better. Agreed. Well, I'm trying to remember the last time I actually read proper documentation. I do tend to go to like LLMs first. Maybe that's bad. But their responses, I know I did a video recently, so I do know that obviously LLMs are always going to be out of date relative to the actual latest version of whatever tool you're using. But you know, for the most part, it doesn't matter. But their responses are opinionated and they do hallucinate. True. This is where experience comes in, because they are mirroring our imperfections. Yeah, I think ultimately it comes down to experience or understanding that they're not perfect. So like you have to treat them as a tool where you know their limitations and you know that they could be wrong and not perfect. So as long as you have all of that context, I think LLMs are great. Because it's still ultimately down to you what decisions you make. If time continues to remain the most critical factor in deciding whether it's worth doing something, then learning is off the table. True. Yeah, good little point there. I cannot agree more on this. Just saw a post today where junior devs are struggling to remember even the basic syntax. Pathetic and alarming, I would say. I interviewed someone who had 15 years experience in Python and they couldn't write a for loop. Obviously that's different, that's just people lying on their CV. The critical thinking aspect would diminish down the lane due to over reliance on AI systems. At least reading programming books and tons of stuff. I also think LLMs are like or AI, whatever. It's like the brain rot TikTok of programming, right? It is a great tool, but if you misuse it, it's like saying you could say the same thing about TikTok. You could probably learn lots of great things on there, or whatever. Or like it's not inherently bad. It's the way you use it that's good or bad. And you know, if you're never thinking, because you can just copy whatever, you know, because I understand text. Generally, someone asks you to do something. Maybe you've got a ticket. You can just copy and paste that ticket into the thingy and it'll spit out, and then you'll look for the place to put it. Yeah. So it's all about how you use it. Me too. Back in my day, lol, old people. There's no proof of anything insinuated in that blog. I mean, they said it's in my opinion, and they also said, it's what it is. And they said they weren't an expert. Yeah, I forget what is high school. High school ages. I'm guessing USA, right? We don't use high school. High schoolers are ages 14 to 18. Fair enough. AI is just another level of abstraction, no more. Anyway, I think we're actually... Oh, I didn't realise I'd been talking for like half an hour. I do tend to ramble. If you're still here, leave a like, subscribe, and all that stuff. And thanks for watching. Leave your thoughts below.